The next phase of the microgrid development process is to secure financing for the project and develop bid packages that can be used to procure the engineering and construction services needed to build the microgrid. Using the technical feasibility study as a basis, the first step is to explore and analyze a range of potential financing options, and then select the approach that is most appropriate, considering both the scope and ownership structure proposed in the feasibility study, as well as the community's financial capacity and access to capital. Financing is one of the most complex and dynamic aspects of the microgrid development process. And just like the ownership models discussed earlier, the devil will be in the details when it comes to a final financing strategy for a particular microgrid project. What follows is a very broad and simplified overview of the primary types of financing that are currently being used for microgrids. These include grants, debt, equity, third-party service models, including power purchase agreements, leases, and utilities. A growing list of reports and research publications, some of which are included in the resource section of the Academy, provide much more detailed reviews of these potential financing models, together with a range of hybrid approaches. Let's look first at grants as a financing option. There are a range of federal, state, and local government incentive programs designed to support clean energy initiatives, including microgrids. Funding mechanisms can include direct grants, tax credits, or low-cost loans. A variety of ratepayer-supported utility energy efficiency programs are also available to support the development of community microgrids. New Jersey, along with Connecticut and New York, have all recently funded pilot programs to fund feasibility studies for microgrids and are exploring strategies to support further microgrid development and deployment. In addition to direct support for microgrid infrastructure development, all these funding sources have energy efficiency and renewable energy incentive programs that can help finance specific components of a community microgrid, from core equipment like photovoltaics or combined heat and power systems, to a range of energy efficiency upgrade to buildings and other infrastructure. In New Jersey, the NJ Office of Clean Energy is the place to find information on these programs. Debt financing can be secured through loans from a bank or other private lending organization. Like any other infrastructure loan, debt financing for a microgrid is typically secured by the project itself. Principal and interest payments are paid by the microgrid owner directly to the lender. It sounds simple, but can quickly become complicated depending on the ownership model and how the loan is structured. For example, if a public entity, such as a municipal government, is the owner or has an ownership stake in the project, it may issue bonds to cover its portion of the debt. The tax status of these bonds will need to be taken into account in calculating the overall cost of the loan, the terms of repayment, and how both impact the fiscal viability of the microgrid project. As in many other types of infrastructure development, independent investors can contribute equity to a microgrid project and obtain an ownership stake. They receive a share of the income generated by the microgrid, together with a share of any increase in value should the microgrid ever be sold. An increasingly popular alternative to community ownership and management of a microgrid is the third-party service model, in which a third party, typically an energy services company, builds, owns, and operates some or all of the microgrid and supplies energy to the users of the microgrid. The company is paid for the energy supplied and to cover the amortized cost of the microgrid infrastructure, just like a utility is paid for electricity or natural gas and the amortized costs of its infrastructure. In fact, existing utilities can serve the same function as a third-party service provider for microgrids, although the details of how such arrangements are structured may differ considerably. Communities benefit from such arrangements because the microgrid is professionally operated and maintained, and in certain types of third-party configurations, the community incurs no debt for development and construction. Third-party models can also save a community time and money because energy professionals are managing the process from start to finish. Third-party service models have a proven track record in the solar industry, where they are often referred to as power purchase agreements. Such agreements are contracts between two parties. One, the seller, which generates the electricity, in this case from solar, but could be from any generation asset, and another, the buyer, who purchases the electricity. The PPA defines all of the commercial terms for the sale of the electricity between the two parties and is often a key instrument of project finance. The image illustrates the linkages in a typical third-party service model using a PPA for a large photovoltaic system. Investors and a solar developer establish and fund an LLC which builds and operates the PV system. The government agency buys power from the LLC at a fixed price for a variable period of time. The government agency also manages the interaction with the local utility, primarily by paying for electricity not provided by the LLC. The process would be similar in a third-party service model for a microgrid, although the LLC might include a number of generation technologies, like combined heat and power, not just photovoltaics, and the government agency might consist of a number of individual community stakeholders and sites. Leasing is a variation of the third-party ownership structure. In these situations, a company, the lessor, owns the microgrid and leases it back to the customer, for example, a municipal government, over a period of years. Rather than paying the lessor company for electricity or thermal energy, the lessee, for example, the municipal government, simply makes lease payments. There is no charge for the electrical or thermal energy consumed by the users of the microgrid, but these users are responsible for the costs of operating and maintaining the microgrid. In addition, lease payments must be made regardless of how well the microgrid performs, which can pose some risk to the lessee, especially if the microgrid is badly operated or maintained. Local utilities are key players in any microgrid development process, if only because of the interconnection that must be created between the local microgrid and the wider electrical grid. That said, utilities across the country are currently wrestling with how to engage with the growing momentum around community microgrids, whether as owners themselves, or as third-party service providers, or through some hybrid variation that hasn't even been invented yet, all of which will form part of the smart grid of the future that is actively being pursued by multiple utilities and the U.S. Department of Energy. A key point for anyone exploring a microgrid in their community is to consult early and often with the local utility to determine what types of ownership and operational structures make the most sense and how some form of utility-based financing might be incorporated into the project. In addition to identifying a preferred financing option for the microgrid development, this phase of the process also addresses procurement by generating a final set of documents that can be used to solicit bids for constructing the microgrid. The documents are typically organized into two separate complementary bid sets. The energy set will address the procurement of a specific mix of generation assets and control systems, typically allowing some flexibility on the part of the bidders, together with a set of security and interconnection specifications. The distribution set will address the overall distribution system layout for the microgrid, together with detailed maps, and will also address interconnection issues. Both sets should include sufficient detail to generate accurate bids for procuring and installing the generation, control, and distribution infrastructure for the proposed microgrid.